Friends, as we prepare for our service to begin, as we prepare to be present for Sandy and her family, as we remember Pete, as we prepare to remember him for those who are present and those who are only able to be present electronically, I would ask a few things of us. First, if you have not been able to provide proof of vaccination or have not yet been vaccinated, please keep one of these on. If you have one of those wonderful electronic devices that allows us to communicate with everyone around the world and know all of human knowledge, and we mostly use it to look at pictures of cats and get in fights on the internet, if we could put those away and silence them. The people we need to hear from are already here with us. And most of all, being present in this moment, that we are able to give our energy, our love, direct our attention fully to Sandy, her kids, their spouses, their children, that we are really present for them in this moment. Death has taken our beloved Peter. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation, in their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Pete's love that united us in life, and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. From Psalm 15. Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless, but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, who never take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. The 23rd Psalm has always brought comfort to us as a people. If you know the words in English, I invite you to join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. From the Holy Sonnets by John Donne, Death, be not proud. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. Then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than thy stroke. Why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Kohelet wrote, the eye never has its fill of seeing. Young or old, those who depart this life never see enough of the world, never complete their task, never cherish their loved ones enough before they are called home. how they yearn for yet another respite from the final summons, and how we yearn to have them close to us for yet another challenge in our lives, yet another joy, yet another precious moment together. God, be now with those whose hearts are broken, because whenever parting comes, it comes too soon. Console them at this hour. Be near to them when light seems distant. Sustain them, O God, until the time of their healing. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, that there is strength in faith. With Job, we say, Adonai natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love. As we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. Friends, I ask that we take a moment of silent prayer, and in this silent moment, I would ask you to dwell on a memory you may have of who Pete was to you. Dwell on a moment that you shared of love, almost certainly laughter, a moment that speaks to you of who he was in your life and what he meant to you. A memory that fills you up, that makes you aspire to be a better person. Dwell on that memory in this moment as we pray silently. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. In our tradition, there are certain mitzvot, certain sacred obligations, who we are taught their reward is without measure. One of them is levayat hamet, which literally means to bury the dead, but it also means to remember the dead and to comfort the mourners. And one of the ways we do so is by telling stories. And as we tell stories, as we remember the person who has passed, in that moment, it is as if they are alive, standing before us once again. I know Pete's daughters, Jessica and Laura, and their husbands, Todd and Kevin, have remembrances, stories that they want to share, so we're going to call them up now to share them.
Hi, everybody. I met Pete and Sandy way back in college in the mid-90s when Jess and I started dating. It wasn't easy for me to break into the Idstein crew. I mean, it took me almost 15 years to win over Laura and Sandy. But honestly, I can't blame them. I was a little rough around the edges back then. But during those days, Pete was the one who really made me feel comfortable and welcomed from the very beginning. He always had my back. Reflecting back on the last 25 years, I never really thought of Pete as a father-in-law in the traditional sense of the word. I considered him more of a close friend or a second father, someone who took the time to really get to know the real me. I was Tado to him, and he was P. Diddy to me. Pete was always so interested to hear about my career and my various jobs over the years. I mean, seriously, nobody ever cared about what I actually do at work. When I landed my first job out of college, Pete asked me if I could get him a t-shirt with my company's logo. Then I started to hop from job to job, but I always made sure to get him that t-shirt before I left for the next company. And then those t-shirts became collector's items. Then whenever he asked about my job and it looked like things weren't going so great, he'd say, well, sounds like it's time to get me that t-shirt. But Pete was so proud of me, and he truly loved to watch me grow in my career and in my life. He was my cheerleader. And I was so proud of him as he hit the peak of his career when he built and operated his Chester charter schools. It was his labor of love. His work had so much positive impact on so many families seeking a better education for their children. It was his turn to show off his entrepreneurial skills to me. Pete was also a dreamer, a futurist. He would constantly pitch me random product ideas. Most of them were terrible. But he had a couple gems. He taught me about neural networks, artificial intelligence, and machine learning long before smartphones were invented. He said that one day someone will create a machine that will be able to clone a person's voice, experiences, thoughts, and feelings so their identity can live on forever. He hoped to have that machine ready in time for his grandchildren. And Pete was a risk taker, a daredevil, like dishing me a give and go with one hand on his walker, or body surfing with me in the Bethany Beach undertow after recovering from a heart attack. He and I shared the motto, go big or go home. I wouldn't be able to count how many times over the years Sandy said, Peter, no! We can't remember Pete without mentioning his health. Jess and I moved across the country to be closer to Pete and Sandy after Pete's second heart attack, which was 21 years ago. But he kept getting up after being knocked down so many times. I mean, he had so many heart attacks that I even watched one live while I was at work as it all unfolded from our Nest Cam when he was staying with us. And of course, he got right back up. He was the Energizer Bunny. But perhaps what I'll remember most about Pete was his love and his devotion to his family. I saw him at his best when the Idsteins, Hardys, and Xanders were all together. Vacations, birthdays, weddings, holidays, and bat mitzvahs. He would always sport his trademark permagrin. The love and support Pete and Sandy gave us was infectious. Pete's wisdom helped me become a better husband and a better father and a kinder and a more empathetic man. He reminded me to make fun of myself once in a while and not to take life too seriously. It was those in-between moments where Pete loved to create his magic. Back in March, he sent me a text out of the blue that read, Dear Todd, I've been wanting to thank you for marrying Jessica. You didn't quite break clean out of the gate, but you did turn out to be a winner, and I love having you in our family. Just thought you'd like to know. You make us all laugh. Well, P. Diddy, I love you, and I thank you for all the wonderful years. You are a remarkable man who lived such a meaningful life. May you rest in peace.
Knock, knock. Not my dad. I know. Cringeworthy. I couldn't help it. He would have loved that one. To know my dad was to know his humor. Irreverent, punny, sometimes esoteric, but usually eye-rolling funny. He loved to make us smile. In fact, I can remember many services in this sanctuary where we would be in the midst of a serious prayer or a sermon, and he would catch my eye behind Mom's back and make a face at me, making me giggle and earning the look from Mom. When I was little, when asked to draw my bath, he would take great joy in seeing my mom's face when she came to check on the progress of the bath water rising, and instead found him making a literal drawing of a bath. When asked to clear the table, he would cheerfully pronounce, "Table, I find you innocent of all charges." At the zoo, his favorite thing to do was to find an exhibit, pretend to see something amazing there, it was empty, just to see the throng of people rushing over to spot the animal as he walked away laughing. A few weeks ago, when I called and asked how he was feeling, he replied, "With my fingers." While his humor could be questionable at times, his love for us never was. I was blessed with a dad who supported me in everything I tried. In sports, in academics, and life, he brought me roses when I was sad, hugged me tight when I was anxious, and told me to follow my dreams even when they took me 3,000 miles away. "I'll take care of Mom," he said. "You take care of you." When I started college, I was a wreck. I did not want to leave home. And one day early on, I distinctly remember calling the house early, and I mean early, in the morning, and my dad answered the phone. 9 out of 10 times, it was my mom who answered. But that morning, when he picked up and I started to cry, instead of handing the phone to my mother like usual, he listened to me cry, and after he said, "What would you like us to do to help?" And I replied, sobbing, "I want to commute." After a pause, my dad told me commuting was always a possibility. By saying those words to me that morning, he gave me both the cushion and the confidence to embrace life at college, and I definitely did that. That was the thing about my dad. He gave me confidence. He cheered me on during the best of times and encouraged me during the rough ones. He said "kick ass" to me before every high school and college field hockey and lacrosse game without fail. If not in person, then over the phone. He taught me a lot about confidence, like how confident he was that the Eagles would blow a lead, or he was confident that the Eagles would ruin his Sunday, or my favorite, he was confident that the Eagles wouldn't win, but rather avoid a loss. You get the idea. But it never changed the fact that he'd watch every week, checking in with me and Jax throughout the game on FaceTime, call, or text. The 4 words, "How about them birds?" had multiple meanings depending on their performance. While he may not have been proud of the Eagles very often, I had no doubt he was always proud of me. Even as recently as 2 weeks ago, he was asking me questions about my nonprofit, excited for it to open, telling me how much he loved being at our house and on the farm, how he loved to live vicariously through me. But nothing made him prouder than his grandkids. The sun rose and set with those 5. I feel so lucky that our kids' memories will be dotted with times with Pop. He played dress up with Ella when she was little and was in awe of her entrepreneurial skills as she grew. He praised her dance and cheer routines, no matter how long they were, and was always up for watching TV and snuggling. He loved that Ella rides horses and liked to joke that he would ride with her if they couldn't tell Mimi. He was proud of every ribbon she earned at horse shows, and pictures and videos of her riding made him smile ear to ear. When I was pregnant with Jax and told my dad I was going to have a boy after 2 daughters, and at the time, 3 granddaughters, he looked at me and said, "Are you sure? Have them check again." He adored watching Jax play ice hockey in Little League and was especially excited to teach Jax how to play poker and chess, which he did so well that Jax could beat him in both. Poppy loved playing board games and cards with Jax and was always up for a game of Sorry, even when, sorry, he'd fall asleep during it. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Jax inherited his Poppy's sense of humor. There are many times when Jax cracks a joke or a pun and we all roll our eyes and say, "Oh, Poppy." Poppy got a kick out of Jax's memory and loved talking science with him. And yes, Dad, wherever you are, we will watch that Universe series one day in your honor. Out of all the love that my dad had for his kids, for his sons-in-laws, and for his grandchildren, there was no doubt that his greatest love was my mom. She was his anchor, his conscience, his partner, his joy, and towards the end, or let's face it, always, his caretaker. Daddy, you know we'll take care of Mom and never let her want for love or laughter, even when she still takes care of us. She is our joy, too. Finally, My dad loved to say that we were all born of stardust and that energy never dies. It gives me comfort to know that his energy is with us now, and every time I see the stars or hear the crash of a wave, I'll feel him with me. Thanks.
We're doing this together for safety in numbers.
Exactly. We'd like to start by saying thank you to everyone for your kindness and support over the past several days and for being here with us to remember my dad and to celebrate his life. When Kevin and I sat down to think about what we wanted to say today, we wound up reminiscing and telling stories about my dad. And after about 15 or 20 minutes, it dawned on us that there was a common thread that tied all of these stories together. They all involve some lesson that we learned from my father, who spent his life educating children and in the process taught his own kids a thing or two that we'll always carry with us.
The first thing that Pete taught us was the importance of family and of embracing those moments when the family comes together. For the Idstein family, those moments often involved Jewish holidays. Hanukkah dinners and Passover seders at the Idsteins were guaranteed to be evenings of good conversation and warm laughter. Pete and Sandy always gathered tons of friends and family around their table, and we're grateful to see so many of them here today, and also grateful that it's a tradition that their daughters have continued. Pete loved the holidays, and he loved making them fun. Who can forget his line whenever the matzo ball soup was served? I'd love to see the matzo ball, I'd love to see the matzo these balls came from. Sorry, Rabbi.
I'm going to take that out of my sermon.
And then there were his irreverent spins on classic Jewish prayers. Everyone knows the Hamotzi ends with Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Well, everyone except Pete. For him, it was always Hamotzi lechem mini Horowitz. He thought it had a better ring.
We never did find out who Minnie Horowitz was.
And no night of Hanukkah would be complete without Pete grabbing his family's menorah near its base, putting his forearm up over his eyes, and in a voice that I can't imitate, saying, "Walk this way."
If I had to distill the lessons that my dad taught us over the years into a single point, it would be this: to find the funny in everything. Like Jessica, I have a million memories of laughing with my dad. My favorite of them are when we laughed when we weren't supposed to, because there's nothing more fun than getting in a good laugh on the sly. My father loved the prayer known as the Silent Amida. For those who aren't familiar with the Silent Amida, it's a silent prayer and an opportunity for personal reflection and atonement during the service. My dad loved that prayer, but not for the reason that most people do. Where many found time to reflect, my dad saw opportunity. It would always start the same. He would do something like make a face or a joke right before the entire synagogue went silent, and then he'd look at us. We'd avoid his eyes until it was impossible to do so, because in trying to make us laugh, he had made himself laugh. And in our periphery, we would see his shoulders heaving up and down. And then we would start. The giggle, the hands over our mouths, our own shoulders, and then always the nasty look from my mom, which actually never worked. I wish I could say that this is what we did when we were young and then we grew out of it, but just a few years ago, I found myself at Rosh Hashanah services in DC, catching my dad's eye and suppressing a giggle. And then, of course, catching the nasty look from my mom.
And it's impossible to talk about Pete without also talking about Sandy. If you knew Pete at all, you knew that he loved Sandy, and she him.
I gave Kevin the hard part.
Whenever I think about Pete and Sandy, I come back to the same memory. At one point, and I can't remember if it was during or shortly after college, but Laura and I were passing through Wilmington with some of our college friends on our way back up to New York, and so we decided to stop by the Idsteins. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the visit. We popped in, had some food, and spent an hour or two sitting around their living room at their house on Woodlawn Avenue. I don't remember specifically what we said or what we did that day, but I do remember the conversation I had with my friend Mark when we got back in the car afterwards. It has stuck with me all these years. Because he couldn't believe what he just witnessed. He said, and you can tell this is back from college, he said, dude, Laura's parents kissed and held hands. They actually touched each other. And he said, I've never seen parents kiss or hold hands or touch each other. And I remember it because we cracked up and we laughed and we drove away. But the story stuck with me. Pete and Sandy loved each other, and it was plain for the world to see. But they didn't just love each other, they liked each other. And that was apparent even to a relative stranger who spent just a couple of hours in their presence.
We learned a lot by watching my mom and dad, and we try to follow their example. I know that my sister and I both looked to find someone whom we could love and who would love us as much as my parents loved each other. I'm happy to say that we both succeeded. You made it, Todd. When I think about my dad and how he felt about me and Jessica and Kevin and Todd and his 5 grandchildren, I know he felt pride. I know he felt pride because he was so good at showing it. He wrote handwritten cards to us every year to tell us how he felt. He was so interested in everything we did. He always wanted to know about the cases Kevin was working on and how things were going for me at school. He loved to listen to Lily sing and hear about her academic exploits. He loved Sydney's sense of humor, and in the final weeks of his life, he worked on a school project with her, a presentation regarding a favorite family recipe, my grandmother's, his mother's, matzo ball soup recipe. And he had a particular pride when it comes to sports. I feel like my dad never missed any of my sisters or my games in high school. I can picture him sitting up on the bleachers, on the hill, above the field hockey field. I don't know why that part's hard. Cheering us on. He loved to watch Jessica and me at Tatnall. He yelled for all of us and for all of our friends who are all here today and rejoiced in our victories. It was so special. And now, 30 years later, when our daughter, Hallie, was in the state championship for softball this year, they won, yay. He wanted to hear about every pitch and every play. After the game, we called it from the car, and I gave him a blow-by-blow of the game. And then, 2 minutes later, he called Kevin to make sure I hadn't left anything out. He was so proud of Hallie.
If there was another love that rivaled Pete's love of sports, it was his love of technology. Pete had what one comedian has called techno joy. It didn't really matter if he had a need with the technology or even if he could use it properly. If it was new and it was interesting, he wanted it. I remember one Thanksgiving, and it must have been 15 or 20 years ago now, when flat-screen televisions first became widely available. Todd will remember this. Pete went to the store before Thanksgiving to get one so that we'd have it in time to watch the football games that were on that day. He bought the largest television that would possibly fit on the wall in their home, bought it home, had it set up, and then he showed it off proudly to me and Todd. It was big, and it was awesome, but there was just one problem. It had no speakers. And by the time we realized it was too late to go buy them on Thanksgiving. So we improvised, and we watched the game on TV, and we relied on the radio for the audio. It worked if you didn't mind that the radio broadcast was 2 seconds ahead of the television broadcast. And I remember, we'd watch the quarterback drop back to pass and then hearing touchdown before the receiver had ever caught the ball. I don't remember the games that day or the scores, but I do recall having quite a laugh And that's how it always was at the Idstein's house.
You took my line. And that's how it always was at our house. In happy times, in sad times, and in scary times, we always laughed. And my dad would be happy that we all sat together and laughed today. He wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Thank you.
Yasher Koach to each and every one of you. May your strength abide and continue. This week and this Shabbat, we will read for the first time the words that we are supposed to say each and every time we enter the sanctuary. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. It is a song of praise for our dwelling place, and usually associated with the synagogue, but we should associate it also with each of our homes as well. As we remember Pete, as we offer comfort to his family, we recall with love the home that he created with Sandy and how good it was and continues to be. A home full of chocolate, but we know that wasn't the only sweetness in his life. A home full of laughter and irreverent humor and real joy, as we just heard. A home where, surrounded by his family, by his beloved Sandy, his children and sons-in-law and his grandchildren, all of whom he adored, who all rushed to be at his side and came right away to be with him, where he left this world for the world to come. How good are his family who carry his love and laughter as a precious remembrance. How good is his home, a home where he will continue to be remembered for blessing. How good is the home we create now in this moment of memory, as we say together, Amen. God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. We call forward Pete's nephew, Cantor Jeff Warschauer, to lead us in El Male Rachamim, and for this I invite us physically, spiritually to rise. Unusual for us, the cantor has a word. So we'll be seated until he invites us to rise.
At school, we had a class that took an entire semester to say, please rise, to learn how to do that, and another one to say, you may be seated. I'm Pete's nephew, Jeff Warschauer, also known as Cantor Jeff. I'm very honored to be here with my wife, Deborah Strauss. And I'm also honored to be representing my branch of the family, which happens to share the same matzo ball soup recipe. Thank God. Nothing compares. On my way here, when Deborah was driving, I was finishing this, and I was thinking to myself, would it be okay to say something humorous? It would not have been okay not to say something humorous. My branch of the family is my mother, Pete's sister, Susie Warschauer, my sister Lynn Warschauer, my sister Karen Brooks, and their families who could not be with us here today. But I bring love and I bring words of comfort from them all. What I remember best about Uncle Pete and Sandy, Aunt Sandy, was just how whenever I'd be with them, it was like an oasis of love and peace. Pete was unfailingly kind to me. I never remember a moment when he was not nice to me. Possibly the moment when I was a little kid and he told me not to touch his guitar, but I did anyway. But he forgave me. He was always kind to me, and as has been said, his ever-present, amazing sense of humor. I think I inherited some of that to Deborah's dismay. And the humor would show, especially when we sang together. We used to sing together for hours and hours. Whether it was chorus after chorus of "There's a little white duck swimming in the water," or when driving my father, Doug, completely crazy with interminable renditions of "A whim away, a whim away, a whim away, a whim away," which my dad, he hated that song. It was great. I'm very glad to see this singing continue so beautifully through Lily, and I'm sure others in your generation and the grandchildren's generation. I'm really grateful to Pete and Sandy's uncanny ability to create community. Here we are. And to sustain family bonds and strengthen them. As a result of that unbreakable bond, Deborah and I are able to be here to help mourn the passing and to honor the life of my dear Uncle Pete. Thank you. Now you may rise. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamaramim Mtzei Menucha Nechana Tachat Kanfei Chashchina B'malot Kedoshim Utorim Kezohar Harkia Masirim Et Nishmat Moshe Ben Shlomo Verot Shalach Leolamo B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchato Hastirehu beseter knafecha leolamim Utzror betzror chaim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato Yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Peter Idstein, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life, and may he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Let's be seated. When I die, give what's left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved, and if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. We remember the spark of love and holiness that was in Pete's life as we invite his family to rise at this time and recite words of Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal Viet Kadash Shemei Rabbah Bialma Divra Chirute Viamlich Malchute B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehe Shemei Rabbah Mevarach leolam olamei almaya Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit romam v'yit naseh v'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal Shemei dekudisha barichu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehe shalama rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort the bereaved among us as we say, Amen. Please be seated. Many thanks to our board members, past board members and past presidents who helped out this morning, helping to usher people through, orienting people, keeping people safe. For those who are here to be with the family, welcome and thank you. If you did not have an opportunity to sign the register book upon entering the synagogue, you may do so at the conclusion of this service, which will be momentarily. Immediately following this memorial service, all family and friends are invited to partake in a meal of condolence at Brantwyn, which is at 600 Rockland Road in Wilmington. There are directions and maps at the register stations just outside the sanctuary. Shiva will be observed tonight at 7 p.m., with visitation tomorrow at 10 a.m. to about 1 p.m., and then another Shiva Minyan at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, and visitation from 12 to 3 on Friday at the late residence, 2401 Pennsylvania Avenue, apartment 804 in Wilmington. And if you need that information, again, we can get that to you, or Schoenbergs can get that to you. As we conclude this service, I ask for Sandy, for you and for your family to rise one last time to look at those who are here to be with you. And I ask all those who are here to be with this family to say these words after me, repeating them to the mourners. We say to them, may God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. And now I invite us all to go forth in peace to life as we say, Amen. And with this, we conclude our service, and especially with our love and support for Sandy and her family.